recent conversations, we have focused on this concept, call it, about how golf is being received at its highest competitive levels. And it's obvious that when you're talking about that you're going to look for mile markers. You're going to look for a method to measure at least engagement, if not more than that, apathy, passion, etc. So television ratings are a pretty interesting way to proceed. Take, for example, the following. This graphic that Dom and Andrew have put together shows us television ratings across a variety of different events in the game of golf, right? And this goes deep where it's comparing multiple years. We could compare these multiple years in a variety of different ways. Again, do you look at it and go, nah, the only thing that matters is what's going on Sunday? These are the Sunday ratings. And you would think that Sunday is going to be the pinnacle. But how much these are impacted by other factors comes into play as well. So then do you look at it from the standpoint of a season and say, well, on balance, on average, we are down by, say, 17%. Josh Carpenter covers golf for the Sports Business Journal. He's here to help us sort all of this out, these questions and more, and what they mean to the game of golf. Josh, it's a pleasure to see you once again. Thank you for your company. I know pretty much everybody already knows what the Sports Business Journal is, but just in case there's someone out there that's joining us that doesn't know, could we start with you explaining to us who the Sports Business Journal is?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple. We cover the business of sports, right, at a high level, all major professional college sports, everything from new facilities, ticket sales, sponsorships, TV ratings in this case, right, that we're talking about today, kind of across the board. And so we're based here in Charlotte, North Carolina, but cover everything nationally, just as any other national sports publication would.
So in your role of covering golf, it's an interesting position to be in as a reporter for golf for the Sports Business Journal, then I would think. Because here we have a game of golf that at a, call it, participation level, the USGA, the R&A tends to call it a recreation level, they're booming. But golf at its highest competitive tiers may be on some uncertain land depending upon how you measure it. What's your take in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it this year kind of across the board, right? The PGA Tour's TV numbers were down. I think it was around 19% for the year. Liv's numbers to start the year, they had some okay numbers to start the year. At least we're talking linear TV, but they dropped throughout the year as we headed toward the end of the season. You know, Matt, there are a bunch of factors you could look at that could say are leading to some of these drops. It's, this fight in the professional game has been going on for, Liv launched around 3 years ago this time. So it's 3 years really of talking about this. Fans are tired of talking about it. They're tired of hearing about it. At the same time, so they're what are they doing? They're not watching as much. They're going out and they're playing that recreational game that we just discussed. I think that's kind of mixing in with the factor that around the time of COVID, you had more players getting out and playing anyway, right? So there's a mix of that COVID boom, players just playing more golf rather than watching it on television, and then you have kind of the fighting between the major pro tours and the men's game, at least, driving people away, and I think people are just kind of tired of it right now, and that's been seen a little bit on the TV numbers this year.
Josh, just so I understand those numbers a little bit. Golf participation, this is according to the National Golf Foundation. 26 million plus on course, call it 27 million if you round up. 18.4 million off course. This is going to facilities where you can watch TV, grab a drink, hit some shots, get something to eat, whatever. So a total of 45 million. Based upon, and if you call that core, these are people that are holding a club in hand and hitting golf balls in one way, shape, or form. So the television audience on average, if you averaged it based upon the chart that I showed you there as we opened the show, 2.7 million on a Sunday, say, that's about 6% of the core active hold a golf club in some way, shape, or form at some point that actually will watch golf on television. 6%. If we go to what the National Golf Foundation calls the overall reach of the game, and these are based in the United States, of 123 million, then you can do the math. It's tiny. It's 1-2% in terms of people who will further engage, if you call it that, by watching it on television. I guess my question for you, Josh, in that regard is that normal to have that big a divide between what I'm calling the core of golf is defined differently by frequency of play, but I'm calling it people who have a club in hand at some point at roughly 45 million by the National Golf Foundation's numbers. Is it normal to have that tiny a number of those people that hit golf balls that care to watch the best in the world play the game?
I think it is. I mean, yes, the numbers are down on television this year, a fair amount over last year. But I think looking back over, and yes, you would certainly say that if you looked at the numbers from the peak Tiger era, in the early 2000s, they're down from there as well. But I still think just that ratio of people who are watching on TV to people who are actually going out and playing, it's always going to be pretty small. Looking back over the years, and then you see that increase of, things like Top Golf and just extracurricular activities around golf that, maybe not necessarily green grass golf, but people going out and holding a golf club and experiencing that. Like you said, I still think it's a pretty small number compared to, the people watching on TV compared to the people actually going out and holding a golf club and playing.
When you look back, let's, Don, pull me up the chart we have on a comparison to other sports for a second, please. When you look back, Josh, on other major sports, when those other major sports tried their fans, generally through strikes, we saw dramatic dips in ratings. But those ratings tended to come back to their average. I'm going to talk to you about what you just touched on in terms of the Tiger years. You could talk about it with the Michael Jordan years, et cetera, et cetera. Caitlin Clark with the WNBA now and with collegiate women's basketball prior. But to the average, it tends to come back to the average. When you look at the chart that we have up there right now, you can see that the NFL is fairly consistent over the last few years. The NBA, fairly consistent over the last few years. And then you see on the right, we just gave people some idea of what national broadcasts do, not the regional broadcasts by and large, the national broadcasts of these different sports and what kind of numbers that they generate. So you get a sense of, because when you look at golf against the NFL, of course, it's paltry, right? You're like, Jesus, this is nothing. But against these other sports, the numbers aren't that bad. So my question for you is, if we are seeing a dip, as you suggested, that might be based upon fatigue, do you see that coming back up to normalcy, or is this the new normal?
I could see it coming back to normalcy. And again, it depends on, I think there are a number of factors that could boost those numbers that could see them going up in the future, right? It's when does the professional game unite again? Is that in 3 years? Is it in 6 years? Is it in 10 years, right? Like, I don't think any of those are really off the table. So could the numbers, get a boost once that happens? It's a thing of looking at, something I wrote about last week. Nielsen, all these numbers you're looking at here are Nielsen rated, right? Nielsen is changing the way that it measures, changing its measurement, basically. It's adding more streaming in, right? So in the future, you could see more streaming added to those numbers. That's going to give them a natural boost. So a number of factors leading into this. I don't know that it's going to keep going down at the level that it went this year. A lot of factors leading to, let's just speak specifically to PGA Tour numbers. They lost more big players to live, right? You had a lot of weather impacted events. Pebble Beach, no final round there. You had smaller name winners in those final rounds, which the numbers you're looking at earlier, those are all final round broadcasts, right? So a number of factors kind of an anomaly this year. That probably are going to go back up a little bit. And so I think once that game is unified in the future, I think you'll probably see it, on a slight upward trajectory going back into the future.
When Jay Monahan at the Tour Championship suggested that while television ratings may be down, their consumption in these other areas that you're referencing was up. As an expert, Josh, where do you fall on that? Do you buy that, or is this something where you scratch your head and go, you know what, with percentages, you could pretty much tell whatever story you want?
There's a lot of spin that you could put on TV numbers and consumption numbers and this and that. Like you could spin that so many different ways. I think if you're looking at it from the tour's perspective, they've been talking in recent years about, hey, we want to grow our younger fan base. We want to get, in front of this, 18 to 35 crowd, which, most golf properties are doing that, right? I think the LPGA would say the same thing. I think Liv says the same thing. We want to get in front of that younger, more hip crowd. And so when Jay says in Atlanta, like, hey, our total consumption is up, that's looking across social, that's on streaming, that's digital, visitors to their website, and that's all good. I still think, Nielsen has primarily been the way that these things are measured, right? That's still what the ad buyers go by. So I think, as Nielsen changes the way they operate and add more streaming to their measurement, I think that's going to be important to look at going forward. I think, Nielsen. I talked to Nielsen for this story, and if you look at the tour's numbers in 2023 and 2024, adding this streaming element to it, their numbers in 2023 would have been 17% higher, and their numbers in 2024 would have been 20% higher than they actually were, than the numbers you're seeing right here. So I think that's something the tour is probably looking at and feeling pretty bullish about.
All right, so you just heard Josh Carpenter, who covers golf for the Sports Business Journal, say that the tour has reason to feel bullish about the way that their product is presented over the last couple of years through a medium that we're on right now: cameras, television, screens of whatever variety that you consume it on. Interesting place to start, because it won't be that long from now when they're going to start talking about negotiations for the next, what they used to call television contract. I'm curious if it's going to be called the media contract going forward or something else. We'll find out from Josh what his perspective is on that and more. Josh, you heard me mention just before we were going to break that we aren't that far away from the tour and media partners going back into negotiation for the rights moving forward. You mentioned the fact that the tour could have reason, because of total consumption, if I'm phrasing that correctly, of 17 and 20% increase over the last couple of years, respectively. Would they still have reason to be, to use your word, bullish going into negotiation based on these numbers? And obviously, you're going to need a partner who has a myriad of different platforms to take advantage of it, right?
Yeah, and I think to clarify, I want to say I think they would be bullish that their numbers would increase from what they were this year based on these new Nielsen measurements, right? I don't think you're going to see, listen, we never know who's coming down the pipe when it comes to golf, right? There could be someone who we don't know exists right now who in 3 years could be a world-class player who could be driving television ratings. We just don't know that. So I don't know that they're going to return to the Tiger level TV numbers that we saw, a decade ago. But I think that they could be bullish on what's to come. I would think, when they head toward these new media deals, this current contract expires in 2030. Like you said, it seems like a long way away, but I guarantee you Rick Anderson at the tour and his crew are already talking about what's next with these TV deals. And as you said, probably more apropos to call them media rights deals. You would have to think there'd be a bigger streaming element in these next set of deals that come up. Give fans an a la carte menu of, they can choose what they want. They can watch more than what they have, current options to watch. I have to think that's sort of, if we talk about a global tour, right, which is what everyone's been discussing, these major television networks, your CBS, your NBC, they're not going to want to their main products on those networks at 3 in the morning when some of the, if you're in Australia, that's when a major final round is happening, right? If you're in Singapore, if you're across, the other side of the world, a lot of this live play is happening overnight in the U.S. when those broadcasters, they love that 3 to 6 window on Saturday and Sunday. So I don't think you'll see them going away from those 3 to 6 Saturday Sunday windows as a whole. But I would think there would be a bigger streaming element as part of these next deals as you look at some of those potential options down the road.
Josh, you'd mentioned in the last segment a demographic group of 18 to 34. And I'm not trying to focus on that group necessarily at the exclusion of any others. I'm just saying you started to get into demographics. So let's talk about demographics for a second. Is golf still a sport where ultimately, regardless of the numbers, they can look at a prospective client, a sponsor, however you define it, in the eye and go, you know what? Our numbers may flow and ebb like everybody's, but ultimately, we're going to bring you the best audience in the world for your premium car or your financial services or anything else that people are trying to peddle.
Yeah, I think the tour should be looking in both of those areas, right? You certainly want that younger demographic, but then you look at that older demographic that a lot of people still see as golf's kind of core audience. Like they're the ones, like you mentioned, they're paying a lot for cars. They're the ones who are paying. We saw the outrage over the Ryder Cup ticket prices yesterday. They're the ones who are, a $750 ticket to the Ryder Cup is nothing. They're the ones buying hospitality at these events, and that's what allows these new title sponsorships on tour to cost so much, but they still have that value, right? So I think that's where you see that older demographic. Flip side of that, yes, they absolutely need that younger demographic. Good story from the Tour Championship. The Tour did that Creator Classic down at Eastlake. I was talking with someone. I wasn't there, but in one of the hotels in downtown Atlanta where most of the players were staying, there was this group of kids milling around in the lobby there. And on one side of the lobby, there were 3 tour players. I think Adam Scott and Shane Lowry were 2 of the 3. And on the other side of the lobby, you had a few of the competitors in the Creator Classic, right? Some of the good guys and Bob Does Sports and all those guys. And these kids walked through the lobby and didn't even look at some of these tour players who were over on the other side of the lobby, and they just migrated straight to these content creators. So I think that's a good kind of a good antidote about the value of those young people and kind of the areas that they need to hit with that younger group.
What you just described, though, in fairness, to me, would seem like a problem. If you were one of the sports, at least major leagues, and you have multiple players, the stars of your sport, easy access, sign an autograph, take a selfie, whatever, and they gravitate away for you for these influencers. I'm trying to give it a comparison in my mind, Josh, to another sport. It's rare. In that case, we saw a 9-hole match with the influencers, fine. But a lot of times with the influencers, you'll see him hit shots. You'll see little contests. You'll see like Brian Brothers and stuff. You'll see him do trick shots, etc. So what do I compare that to another sport? Players playing horse in basketball, but they become huge celebrities in their own right and through their own distribution and to their full credit that they have created this. I guess my bottom line question is there a comparison to any other sport? And is this something that the sport of golf, if you were running one of their major leagues, would you look at and be a little bit concerned?
I think, well, it's hard to compare because golf is the one sport, right, that like you can't, your Joe fan can't go out, your content creator can't go out and play on an NFL football field, right? You can't go out and play it. Yes, basketball maybe would be a little bit more comparable. But so I think there may be a problem in the current time, right? If you've got kids who are not focused on your star players and they're going to these content creators, but I think there's opportunity in the future. You saw how well that Creator Classic did. You mix in some of that stuff, they mix with more tour players. They get the tour players more together with some of those creators. Gosh, you look at what Bryson DeChambeau has done on YouTube with his Break 50 series and how popular that has been with, I believe he's had some other pro players maybe with him. He obviously had Donald Trump on there, and you've seen the engagement that's driven. So I think best of both worlds is to kind of combine those and grow those together, rather than having them separated out.
Let's talk about Bryson for a second, because I'm still trying to read the clouds in this whole thing. Bryson's on YouTube. He has over 1.5 million subscribers currently. And for those that would criticize the way that the tour has approached their media rights, they'll say this is exactly why the likes of Bryson left, because now we can create this content which is bringing in, call it that coveted demographic you want to, but at the very least, it's bringing millions and millions of views for what he's doing. So I guess on some level, do you look at it and go, if the tour tries to control media rights and tries to control the way and the pathways that their product is distributed, are they not running the risk of being left behind as these new influencers, personalities, distribution, content from stars such as Bryson continue to take on a life of their own?
Yeah, I think it's something that I would definitely keep in mind. I mean, if you look at it, if Bryson had that PGA Tour logo, if he was still a member of the PGA Tour and he's creating all this stuff on YouTube and he's got 1.5 million subscribers, like you said,
Yeah.
think about the extra brand awareness that's going to be out there for the PGA Tour. I've always drawn the comparison. Look at the NBA and how, and I know basketball and the Players Union is different from golf. It's different from the PGA Tour, but look at how popular NBA Twitter is and how many. If you're on Twitter or X on a given game night, there are highlights from fans, from media personalities all over. You can't escape it. And I just have always thought, like, the PGA Tour, with the way its player rights are structured with regards to media, it hampers it a little bit in that they lose some of that potential virality in terms of that PGA Tour brand being out there on social media a little bit more. So I've got to think that's part of the discussions that are being had in terms of those new media rights deals that come up in 2030. I know a lot would have to kind of change, with regard to the players' rights, to make that happen. But I've got to think that those conversations are being had.
Is there reason, Josh, bottom line with this, is there reason to be concerned about the direction of television ratings at golf's highest tier?
I mean, I think so. You can't look at the numbers this year and say, certainly there are some positives that you can look at with the new Nielsen measurement, with the streaming and all that. But I still think I always go back to television and broadcast TV is how most people consume things, right? You still see the NFL numbers every Tuesday, and some streaming's been being added into some of those. If you look at talking about Nielsen specifically and the new measurement, the Thursday night games on Amazon, those primarily come out with a Nielsen only rating on day, and then on Monday they add that new Nielsen measurement in to add a little bit of streaming. But broadcast TV is still what most people go by. The WNBA ratings that we've seen go through the roof this year, still everyone's talking about those in a broadcast TV perspective. So I think the tour has got to think about some innovations to go about, and they're doing some of that with some of these fall broadcasts. But yeah, I would be concerned probably. Like I said, could be some growth there in the short term with the new Nielsen stuff, but I still think broadcast TV is what people go back to watching.
You mentioned a moment ago, which I thought was interesting, the pricing of the Ryder Cup tickets that is causing a firestorm. I mean, and we're talking about the passion that people have towards this. Here's what Kevin wrote. He says, I'd like to go on record now and say that if Europe wins the Ryder Cup at Bethpage because the crowds were turned into a polite snooze fest like LACC, by the insane ticket prices, it's going down as a massive own goal. These prices are, you're talking about Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, $749.51, and that's what you were referencing. Okay, you're the golf reporter for the Sports Business Journal. What is the business that is behind all this? What's going on? And is this just horrific timing for this announcement to be coming out?
Yeah, look, my standpoint on this is like and a lot of people have this similar view. Like the Ryder Cup, I haven't been to a Ryder Cup in person. I've been to a President's Cup in person. It's a tough viewing experience in person. Would I pay $750 to go to a Ryder Cup, to a President's Cup? Probably not. I think it would be a better product on TV. That being said, and I said this yesterday, I don't think the PGA of America would set these prices these ways if they didn't think they could sell these tickets. I think this Ryder Cup specifically at Bethpage Black, Matt, we've been talking about this Ryder Cup for how long now? 6, 8 years. Like this is being billed as one of the top golf events of the decade. Bigger than majors, bigger than some of your other signature events on the PGA Tour. One of the biggest events of the decade. It's in which market is it in? It's in New York. It's one of the biggest markets in this country. And so my point yesterday was, yes, these prices are outrageous. I would not pay these prices to go to this event. But with the way it's being, the anticipation that's being drummed up around this event, would a New Yorker pay $750 to go to the World Series, to an NBA Finals game at MSG? And I think they would. And so I don't think they'll have a problem selling these tickets for these prices, despite them being what they are.
Shane Ryan, I find to be a pretty balanced journalist, and his post yesterday at X also grabbed my eye. He says, "I'm just going to say, come what may. If I were a player, I would flat out refuse to play in the Ryder Cup without fair compensation, and I would be fully willing to tolerate the propaganda thrown against me. This has always been my position, but these prices cemented. In terms of the prices themselves, I do wish that there was some law in place, not just for the Ryder Cup, but for everything up to a Taylor Swift concert, to cap prices at some reasonable limit. But under current rules, I can't begrudge the PGA of America for trying to get what they can, I guess. I would laugh if I were asked to pay for these prices for a donation from my charity. Like, are you kidding me? Everyone is there for the players. What is this? The NCAAs? These are professional. There is an insane irony for professional golfers of all people that they're athletes who are sort of quietly bullied by calls of patriotism and history into playing a premier money-making event for free. So, Josh, I guess my question for you here, and it goes down to much of what we've talked about today, but this is the epitome of it. Now, bear in mind, this is the PGA of America. We've talked about the PGA Tour. We've talked about LIV. We've noted some of the majors, just so we have distinctions on all this. I'm not trying to pile any of this on one person, but I will put them all under this one category of golf for a second, if you would allow. Is golf really bad at reading the room?
It seems to be sometimes, right? Yeah, look, it's not, you asked earlier about, and you asked about timing earlier, and is this a bad time to be asking about? Like, yes, I think on top of the fighting in the men's pro game that, like, we've been talking about, that we've had going on for 3 years now, it's all about money, right? All you hear is money, money, money. And now these prices for one of your most pure events, right? The Ryder Cup is golf in its purest form. The players aren't there, playing for money, like you mentioned, and then you have it come out that it's $750 for a ticket. Yeah, sometimes it is. It seems like sometimes golf as a whole cannot get out of its own way, and I don't know, Matt. Does it end anytime soon? Do we see more stuff down the road where they're going to still be getting in their own way?
Yeah, and that's the big question. That probably would be a perfect way to end this, where do we see it going down the road? Because you mentioned, you talked about a time frame, a few years, 3 years, 6 years, 10 years. Will we see the game come together at the top? If, in fact, these ratings are being impacted by a fatigue factor, an exhaustion factor from the fans, that time frame that you were talking about, interestingly enough, will take us right in through and beyond the negotiation process of the next television rights deal, which is going to be, I think, fascinating with all of this at a certain point, because of the rights that all the sports are getting across the board. At some point, you have to sit back and go, how much is, I'm not so much saying how much is enough in a capitalistic society, but from the standpoint of how much can everyone afford to play? Where is this money all going to come from? pay the players, pay the rights fees. It's kind of wild. So I'm going to cast the net a little bit wider than where you just left it, Josh, and say your job is to chronicle all this. Your expertise happens to be in sport, but the Sports Business Journal is covering this stuff every single day. Where do you guys see all of this going 5 years, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we've talked about 3 years since Live launched, and it feels like an eternity, right? I was talking to someone similarly at the Tour Championship, and they said, 3 years right now seems like a really long time. And if this isn't figured out in another 3 years, that's 6 years. That still feels like a really long time. In the grand scheme of things, though, if we figure out the future of professional golf, of men's professional golf for the next, let's say, 50 to 75 years, and how it's going to be structured, then 3 to 5 years really isn't that long, right? And so I still think there's a long way to go in terms of the negotiations between PIF and the PGA Tour in terms of a deal. Even if they do agree to do a deal, it's going to take so long for the Department of Justice to approve this and get it across the line. So, I think, you've heard 2026, 2027, like I would think 2026 would be extremely optimistic to see everything kind of come together. Because you have new Live players coming on board who are signing contracts with that league to play for multiple years, right? It's not so easy to just break a contract. With the people that Live has been hiring, like that league is not going away. You hear sometimes people say, well, it's just going to go belly up next year. With the amount of money they've put into it, with the level of executives that they've hired to run that league, I don't see it going away anytime soon. And so I think they've got to figure out how to bring everyone back together, but I still think that's a few years off.
If golf was at its highest competitive levels, if golf was a publicly traded stock, is Josh Carpenter buying or selling?
Can I say hold?
Josh Carpenter is the golf reporter for the Sports Business Journal. Always fascinating to catch up with you, my friend. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Matt. We appreciate it.